Hello. Thought we'd take a few moments in this video to talk about the transcendental phenomenological method. The assignment for the the practice of transcendental phenomenological method has already been posted. In fact, I think it's due this evening. This is Friday, the 20th of September. And I wanted to kind of walk through this with you a little bit, kind of update what we talked about in a video a week or two ago. But I want to say to thank you for your patience on this, because we started this out as just a cluster of directed study students, 2 or 3, not enough to make a class. And so what I did was I simply migrated the fall of 6315 to the fall of 6315 to the fall of 2013, just migrated the Blackboard so that you see notes that are actually written in fall of 2013, but they're not very much different than the notes I might have written if I had sat down and built the course from scratch. So in a way it was a convenience for me because they were directed studies, and I hope it's working out well for you. But we're now more of a formal course because there are so many. There's a new student joining soon named Robin Burton coming in late, but it's a course at this point, and even though we've got, shall we say, a year-old notes, they are really current notes, and for the most part, but maybe the video will help to do some updating of that. I hope my plan is, I think I've been doing, I may have missed last week, I can't remember, I had some technical difficulties on this end, or maybe that was 2 weeks ago. Time goes by. But anyway, do a video every week to kind of update the notes and talk about where we are. One thing I want to say is these first 2 or 3 exercises, the transcendental methodological one that you are doing, the epoche, the reduction, and the imagining variation, I think I have spoken to that in a previous video. They are ways of engaging a phenomenon so that we can look at it sort of from the inside out, look at it in a way so that it naturally appears to us, not in a way that we automatically presuppose that it is. I think the epoche, the sort of philosophical way, I guess you'd say. Husserl in the phenomenological method is very philosophical anyway. It's about epistemology and how we see the world, how we think the world is constructed. To some extent, I suppose it's ontological because it reflects the structure of the world. But I think from the phenomenological method standpoint, there's not really any structure out there except that what we agree to see and create in our own social interaction in terms of creating social phenomena. One thing I think is important to keep in mind is that the bottom paragraph of those notes, I updated these, but I think it's the set of notes that I think I posted it August the 30th, 2013, but it's a set of notes that talks about Chapter 2 of the Moustakas text. So even if it's the old set, it will be the Chapter 2 of Moustakas. The Transcendental Phenomenology Conceptual Framework is that chapter. On those notes, there is, in the last paragraph of those notes, it says on page 26, it's referring to Kakelman's book. And I think there's a very interesting analogy, I guess you'd say, in how we want to think about this. And that is, for Husserl, Moustakas says, intuition precedes empirical knowledge. And he's using an illustration as a tree. The tree is there before we see the tree. The tree is there before we define it as a tree. The trick here, and it's not so easy, and I'm not sure that we can be completely satisfactory in doing it, is to try and see the world before it appears by our definition. And it's an exercise in mental concentration and thinking about what we're doing in this course, so that in the epoche, what you're doing is you're not looking out the window and observing a group and automatically defining it. You're letting the tree appear, not as a tree, but you're seeing the phenomenon appear and then subsequently naming it as a tree. And so that in a social phenomenon, if we see 2 people like we've talked about before out there, we don't automatically assume we know who they are, what they're doing, or what they're about. we let them appear to us, and then from the indicators of their presence and what they're doing, we reduce to them, and then we, in our imaginary variation, we begin to come up with what we think they are about: friends, lovers, acquaintances, brother and sister, all that sort of thing. So I think the kind of the conceptual background, the philosophical background of what that epoché is all about is in that reference in Chapter 2, the Transcendental Phenomenology Conceptual Framework, and particularly in Moustakas' discussion around Cockelman's book. I suggest you take a look at that. It goes on quite a bit for a couple of pages, and get your mind into the meat of that and get a sense of what we're after when we're doing that epoché. And it's not just for this exercise, but as qualitative methodologists, we don't want to go into the west side of San Antonio or the east side of Houston or wherever we are with the preconception of what we're going to find, because indeed we'll find it, won't we? Or maybe we'll be disappointed that we don't. What we want to do is we want to go in there and let it appear to us and then frame it from our empirical variation how we think it is, but without preconception. In other words, what we're after here is the client's voice. Let that phenomenon speak to us and not us define it. Very hard to do. We live in a world where we're successful navigators because we have predispositions and preconceptions. We have these things, patterns that enable us to navigate the social world. To step out of those patterns is very difficult for us to do. We're not accustomed to doing that. In fact, we could be quite uncomfortable with it. So, but you and I, as qualitative methodologists, we must do that. So pay some attention to that. I hope you enjoy the Mondrian paintings I stuck in here. He's always fascinated me from años, when I was just much younger than I am now. How he painted trees. I've always been fond of trees, oak trees in particular, but any tree, especially in the winter when there are no leaves and you see just the frame of the branches and stuff on the horizon. Just fascinating, the relationships. And that's really what his paintings are about relationships. He goes from the beginning of a real recognizable tree to those more abstract relationships where the trees become virtually indistinguishable, and he becomes more abstract in relationships. But you can see, if you look at the first tree, the relationships that are there, and then if you look at the end, it's not the same tree, but you can see what he's doing when he gets to those squares and boxes and the different colors and all of that. Now, as we move into that, through that chapter in 29, I want to mention here, they talk about the interpretive form and intentionality. What we see is what we intend, because we define it as so. That's a tree, and probably we would all agree that it's a tree. The classic case is a coiled piece of rope, and some of us might see it as a snake, and others as a coiled rope. And so our intention to a rope or our intention to a snake can influence what we actually see, or actually delude ourselves and we're not really seeing it at all in the way we think we are. So those are important. Intentionality. What is our intention here? We go to the east side. What are we intending? We go to the east side of Houston. What's our intention going over there, and how is that governing and influencing our perspective on that place? So intentionality and interpretation is a very important part of this, because from the standpoint of the phenomenological method, much of what we see is interpretive. There's not a objective structure out there. It is a subjective structure that is a construct of our consensual agreement in the mass of interpretations that we make. Kind of a freaky thing to think about, isn't it? But anyway, that's being the case. Now, I want to make some distinctions here between noema and noetic. These are $5 words in phenomenology. I suppose in one sense we could say group as the noema, and or the social phenomena anyway of interest, family, let's say, as a noema. And then noetic is a perspective of, say, from the inside that defines that, or perhaps our own perspective on how it defines how we define family, what we expect it to be. So when we think of noema, think of the say that couple, and we're trying to understand that man and woman out there, what they are, what's their relationship, what kind of relationship. So we look at their movements and their interaction and their facial expressions. Even we can't even hear them. We don't want to hear them. We want to be able to see the phenomenon as the dynamic as it moves about in front of us, and then do our interpretive of what that form is. What is that noema that we see? The indicators of the presence of that social phenomenon that began to appear, that noema that begin to appear, that is a construct of their noetic perspectives. What each of them brings to that relationship then becomes a reflection, a construct of their combined noetic perspectives, and creates a noema. Maybe there are two young people who are seeking love, and they each come with their past, with their noesis, their noetic perspective about what love is, and they encounter one another, and they bring that and they integrate it into the coupledness of who they are, and that coupledness becomes the noema, the phenomenon of their love. So keep that in mind, and that's just two people we're talking about here. But when we talk about the east side of Houston, I'm sure people that live on the east side know they live on the east side of Houston. And the neighborhoods, I'm sure it's large enough, like the west side here in San Antonio or the east side here in San Antonio, large enough to comprise several neighborhoods. But what is that noema? What is that sense when people say, I live on the east side of Houston? What is that noema? What is that social phenomenon? What is that demographic container? A container that holds the demography of the residents on the east side or the west side of San Antonio or the north side of San Antonio or any side of any city. What is that noema? How is it constructed? How can we see it on the outside, not living on the east side, but we know it's there? We have a sense of it. Our noesis of it may be different because it's external, but their noetic perspective would be very constructive because they're internal and they're defining it. We've made the distinction before about horizon and boundary. Our noesis sees the east side of Houston as a boundary because we're the external looking at it, but we have a noetic perspective. We can define it in a way, but it's a boundary because we don't live there. We don't form it. But inside, their noesis and the interaction of themselves, much like that couple, they create that phenomenon, that noema of the east side. Their combined aggregated noetic perspectives create that, and they see that as a horizon, the east side, from the inside looking out. Very important distinctions for us to keep in mind as qualitative methodologists at any scale that we are, whether we're just talking you and me, one-on-one. What kind of noesis do we bring, noetic perspective? What is a noema that we create in our engagement to people? Or in this case, say, an instructor and a student. What kind of noema? We'd want to be able to create a noema that is supportive of one another, has good rapport. I would want that so that I could, with some ease, be able to reach out to you and guide you and say to you, you know a lot more than you think you do, and don't be so sweating it out, all of that sort of thing. So the distinctions between noema and noetic are important for us, and they continue that way. There's an interesting illustration of how it falls apart, and we probably all have had these experiences. On page 30, he talks there about the relationship with the physician. One of the ways that you want to have a successful relationship with your physician, when we don't often, right? Because for one thing, we might have a white coat effect and we walk in there and our blood pressure goes up. But in order to have really a successful relationship with a physician, you have to have that kind of a noema where your noetic perspectives are more harmonious. He's not official and physician, or she is like, I'm the doc and you're not, and I'm the patient and you're not. You want to find a common ground where you can integrate the perspectives of the two of you and understand the medical regimen that the physician is suggesting, and you ask good questions and you come away from that able to carry out the physician's instructions and get well. And we know that often that doesn't happen. They're in a hurry and we're scared or frightened. We don't know what we got. You do have this conversation, prescribe a medicine, you leave, and then as you're walking out the car you think, what the hell was that all about? I'm not sure I'm going to get any gain from this, except I've got 2 jars of pills that I have to take for the next 90 days. Something's missing in that relationship. So in our everyday lives we have those kinds of things where we have a sense of relationships not being as good as they are, and then others are much better than we could ever imagine. You know, so think about the differences between those and your own noetic engagement and what that noema is. Now, when we're looking at, just for a moment, when we think about the ethnomethodology assignment coming up, that's an interesting one, because what we're doing there is we're breaching noemas. We're breaching phenomena. You know, the classic one, the fun one, is getting on an elevator. The noema on an elevator, the noetic perspective of everybody in the elevator, is when you go in the elevator, you turn around and you face the door. Push the buttons. Maybe you'll ask somebody, what floor do you want? And you'll push the button because you're a good person. But if you get on the elevator and you go back to the wall and you face the back wall, you're very disruptive of the noema. You're disruptive of the noetic perspectives of everybody on board, and they're going to think, this person is really weird. You're supposed to turn around. You know, what is this behavior? And the purpose of ethnomethodology is to breach the noema in order to bring the assumptions of the construction of that noema, the noetic perspectives, to the fore, so that they can be examined. Now, you're not going to, in an elevator, you may do something disruptive, but you're not going to say, hey, let's form a little, let's get off at the next floor and sit around in a circle on the floor in the lotus position and talk about why we were upset. But theoretically, you could do that, you know. But that's really the purpose of the breaching of an ethnomethodology. It's to disrupt. Now, and the classic one is, another one is if you're walking down the hallway and your friend, or somewhere, your friend disses you. And you go, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? How come you are rude to me? It's disrupted the noema of friendship. Your noetic perspective has been brutalized, shall we say. So you call them out. What's going on? You know, and try and restore the noema that you had. And maybe they were just so preoccupied they didn't even see you. So we have these breaches that happen naturally, and then there are breaches that happen intentionally. Somebody that intentionally breaks the line in line behavior, disrupts everybody, cracks the noema and the noetic perspectives of proper line behavior, and people get disturbed and call that person out. So I think those are useful distinctions we want to keep in mind. Ethnomethodology is about that. Excuse me. When we get to the next one, the observations, that's another way. The observation is more directly looking at a group, two or more people, and being able to understand from the dynamic of the interaction going on, indicators again, like that couple that we were talking about earlier. Can we define what that noema is? Is it a group of friends? Is it a family group? Is it acquaintances? Is it a crowd? What's the nature of the group? Can we get a sense of the indicators? What is that noema that we see? What can we surmise about the noetic perspectives from the inside if we were in the middle of that? And so we lay that out and describe it. And then that's one. That's a non-participant observation. The other one will be a participant observation where we're inside a noema, sitting around a table with our colleagues at in the lunchroom or something, and getting a sense of what that noema is and the noetic perspectives from the inside. That is a participant observation. And then we're also going to do sociograms. That we're going to diagram it. If we're sitting around a table, let's say, or you're watching a table from a distance, what is the rate of exchange? Say there are 4 people there. Maybe person 1 and 3 are talking a lot, 3 and 4 not too much, 2 and 3 a little bit, and all of that. And you're diagramming it a little bit, and you'll see what I mean by that. And that's a sociogram, kind of giving a visualization, a picture of what that noema is, insofar as we can describe it by the magnitude of interaction. And then the other one that we'll have towards the end, dramaturgy, that is where it's more intentional related to interviewing, which you'll be doing as you do some of these qualitative interviews to set up your qualitative proposal at the end of the semester. Dramaturgy is about the consideration of this interaction you and I are having right now, although it's a video, as a stage play. That it's a playwright. I'm a playwright in a way. You're a playwright. I'm a playwright in the sense that I come into this and I want to set it up where you have some rapport and you get good response from me. If you're in an interview setting and you're the interviewer, you want to get rapport with the interviewee. You want to think about how you want to get that rapport. What kind of a setting do you want to have in order to get the best information? Do you want to meet with them over a cup of coffee, or in a more formal way in an office? Dramaturgy is about the scripting and the playwriting and the setting of a stage for an interview. Dramaturgy. So and that is an intentional creation of a noema that will allow that person's noesis to see what's happening, and your noesis is noetic perspective, is constructing the possibility for that noema to occur between you and that interviewee. So hopefully this kind of conversation will help you a little bit as we begin moving through the next week or two. I'll come back next week with another video and follow up on some of the notes that are later, like in chapters 4 and 5. And 3. There's some interesting things there. Right now, the big part is chapter 5, because it really lays out there the basic dynamic of the transcendental phenomenology, the eposé, the reduction, and the imagining variation. Something we do all the way through this course, and you will practice when you do your interviews and lay out in your proposal. And keep in mind the noema and the noetic. It's important to keep those distinctions as you work through all of this. So thank you very much. And from me, I don't know when you're going to see this. Maybe you'll see it next week, but right now it's a Friday, and the 20th, and there's a weekend coming up. So I hope everyone has a good weekend, is safe out there, and talk to you next week. Take care.